Story. Chapter 5. Ochako was shaken back to her senses by Suyu, who had recently arrived at the scene. What happened, Ribbit? She asked, her voice filled with a rarely seen urgency. THTH, there was A versus villain A and he. Multiple sobs interrupted her. She threw herself into Suyu's arms before she could actually complete the sentence, tears streaming down her face. Suyu held her friend tightly, gently patting her back and whispering words of comfort in her ear. I couldn't do anything. Ochako finally managed to get out, calming herself a tiny bit. The villain used me as a hostage and she wasn't able to continue as she started weeping again, burying her face into Suyu's arms. They stayed this way for a while until Suyu finally stood up, bringing Ochako with her. Come on, she said to her, let's go see how he's doing. Ribbit. Ochako simply nodded and wiped off her tears with her arm, which proved to be useless as fresh new ones started coming out almost immediately. They got into the first taxi they saw and headed for the hospital. The drive was a slow, anxious one. Neither of the girls talked as they were only beginning to digest the events that had just occurred. Ochako was absolutely devastated. She kept blaming herself for what had happened. Suyu, on the other hand, was in a complete state of shock. She was arriving at the bakery, hoping to catch some last-minute bread when she saw the police cars flooding the outside of the shop. She had quickened her pace and saw an ambulance leave as she got to the door. Ochako was inside, tears slowly rolling down her face, unresponsive to everything around her. When they finally arrived, Suyu paid and they ran towards the entrance as fast as they could. They went to the receptionist and Suyu asked about Izuku, Ochako being unable to mutter more than a few words. They were sent to the waiting room. Izuku was in critical state and wasn't able to receive visitors, but he'd be stable and in a room of his own in the next few hours. The wait was endless. Neither of the girls spoke a word. Even though they had just received confirmation that Izuku would be okay, they couldn't shake off the feeling of dread from their minds. Ochako had buried her face in her hands, still blaming herself for what had happened, while Suyu tried to comfort her but she wasn't able to say much herself. Hours later, both of the girls were still in the waiting room, anxious to the news that was about to come. Ochako was exhausted both mentally and physically. Suyu had almost recovered and was trying to engage Ochako in conversation, with no real results. When she was trying for the 15th time, she was interrupted by a nurse coming out of the hall adjacent to the room, calling out both of the girls' names. They stood up and went towards the door, not caring about how tired both of them were. Please, follow me this way, the woman said, moving slightly away from the door so that the two girls could pass. She then started walking down the halls, the girls close behind. She suddenly stopped at the doorway of a room and pushed the door open slowly. He's on heavy painkillers, so he might be asleep right now, the nurse said as she stepped aside, allowing Ochako and Suyu to enter. As she walked inside, Ochako saw a white curtain in the middle of the room. The shadow of a hospital bed was visible through it. She quickly made her way past it and found herself standing right in front of the wounded Izuku. He had a large bandage covering his chest. A little red mark was seen on the side, where he had been stabbed by the villain. His face was pale, his eyes had dark spots underneath them, showing the lack of rest he'd had. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Free. Onishots 149K3K. This is a collections of free X readers. Requests on this are now closed. The Heroes Return MHAXJJK, ongoing 114K 1.7K and quad, Izuku. Midoriya, after being betrayed and killed, vanishes leaving hurt people behind. After 2 months and a half, he come back, changed. How will the class re? Ohm fluke a day 112K 8.2 kiloamperes. Collection of short ohm fluke over 365 days. Please check the second book for the rest of the day's update. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.42.5K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmic. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. The hero who sings with a smile 38.5K 364 high. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. Mirko X Shy Male Reader 167K 1.1 Key. Don't own MHA. I hope you enjoy the story I made. Zero Deku Onishots 31.4K 791. Because of circumstances, this book won't be continued, unfortunately. Feel free to check out my other stuff. Thank you for understanding. Izuku. Ochako yelped in surprise, then realized she had called him by his first name, which made her blush furiously. Suyu blinked in surprise but didn't comment on it. Hey. He said weakly but smiled nonetheless at Ochako's presence. Are you okay, Ribbit? Suyu said, moving to one side of the bed. Yeah, I'm fine. He smiled again, flinching in pain as he moved upward, trying to sit up. Don't. Ochako said, moving to the other side of the bed. Lay down, you need it. Izuku stopped trying to sit up and laid back down, a sigh of relief leaving his lips. That was really stupid, you know. Ochako commented, scolding him for his actions. But, I finally made my wish come true. He smiled brightly at her. I was a hero. The girls couldn't help but smile at the comment. He had shared with them that he wanted to be one when he was a kid some weeks prior. Still, Ochako said again, not wanting to drop the subject, don't do that again. Okay, Izuku said, but neither of the girls believed him. They talked for a little while, but it was evident Izuku needed rest. Ochako didn't want to leave him alone, so she proposed to stay with him for the night. Why, you really don't have to, Izuku said, his face a deep red. I want to, Ochako responded, then turning immediately red as she realized what she had said. Well, it is decided then. Ribbit. Suyu smiled as she started to leave the room. Goodbye, you two. Izuku and Ochako waved goodbye as she went through the door. Then realizing the situation they were in, her face was still red, so she looked away from him and started wondering what made her react that way. They stayed this way for a bit, not saying anything to each other. Ochako was the first to break the silence. How are you feeling? She asked, still looking away from him. Be better, he stuttered, just a little tired. You should go to sleep then, she exclaimed, baffled as to why he hadn't done it yet. I know, he said, looking down in embarrassment. I just wanted to talk a little longer. Ochako let out a long sigh before responding. Okay then, she said with a smile as she started to turn back towards him. What do you want to talk about? She stopped talking as soon as she saw the sleeping Izuku in front of her. She let out a small laugh. Just how exhausted were you? She thought as she smiled softly. She grabbed a chair that was close and put it next to the bed before sitting on it, gazing absent-mindedly at the sleeping boy while a million thoughts went through her head. Thoughts on what she had just done, of the events that had just happened, but mostly those thoughts were of the boy sleeping soundly in front of her. A small blush forming on her cheeks as she thought of him. She put her arms on the bed and her head on top of them, trying to get some rest herself. It wasn't long before she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. dash 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 dot. It's my fault, Izuku said, his tears blending in with the rain from that day. I'm so sorry I disappointed you. He gazed down towards the recently placed tombstone, filled with regret and sorrow. He remembered everything vividly. His mom yelling at him for not doing his job, how she had collapsed right after doing so, his mom on the hospital bed the very next day, her heartbeat monitor coming to a stop, her funeral, everything poured into him and only added to his guilt. If only I had done it correctly, you would be here with me now, he said in a low voice, almost losing his composure. Every single day since, Izuku blamed his mother's passing on himself. The doctor had told him that it was caused by a brain tumor that had settled months ago, but she never went to have it checked. Izuku berated himself for this. It was his fault that his mom had been teaching him how to manage the bakery on his own and had poured all of her time into it, which eventually caused her death. Dash 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 dot. Izuku awoke suddenly, his eyes wet with the memories that flooded his head. That dream hadn't appeared while he was sleeping for a while now, but the fact that he was in the same hospital that it happened made it understandable as to why it would return. He tried to sit up but was held down by the pain in his side. The painkillers had worn off, which made the wound sting a lot more than it had the day before. Midoriya. He looked down and saw Ochako, who had just woken up, looking up at him. GG good morning you Uraraka, he said, his voice cracking 1,000 times as he realized that she had actually stayed with him all night. Good morning, she replied, sitting up as fast as she could, a furious blush forming on her cheeks as she did. How'd you sleep? He asked, trying to speak as normally as he possibly could. Really well, she stuttered, not being able to hide her face from him. She quickly composed herself and noticed Izuku's watery eyes. Are you okay? She asked, worried about him. Why yeah, he responded, looking down at the same time, just had a dream about my mom again. I just feel really guilty is all. Ochako got up and sat next to him on the bed. Are you gonna be okay? She asked, not wanting to press further. Yeah, he smiled at her, I'll be fine. Good. She rested her head on his shoulder, in an attempt to comfort him, which made his face turn a deep red. Does your wound hurt? She asked, trying to change the subject. Not as much, he said with a soft smile, it'll be all right. Her eyes started to water as she remembered the events of the day before. I'm sorry, she lamented while burying her face in Izuku's shoulder. I wasn't a good enough hero, and it made you get hurt. You did your best, Uraraka, don't worry. He smiled at her, even though she didn't look. It's really hard sometimes, tears slowly flowing down her face. Being a hero, sometimes you can't save everyone. I'd give everything to be a hero. His smile grew bigger and she finally lifted her face from his shoulders. She looked at him with teary eyes. How can you smile, even after what happened? Because a hero should always wear a smile. Ochako couldn't help but smile at this comment, the one a certain symbol of peace had repeated over and over back when she studied at UA. Sorry Midoriya, she said, wiping the tears away. I wanted to comfort you, but it ended up being the opposite. Don't worry about it. He brought his arms around her, not caring about the enormous pain in his side. You helped me plenty, let me help you now. She hugged him back and smiled at him. You might actually have everything to be a hero, Midoriya. He looked down, the smile still on his face. Thank you. he said, remembering all the times he'd been told the opposite as a child. They stayed that way for a while until a nurse walked in to change Izuku's bandages and clean the wound. Ochako was given the option to leave, but she decided to stay with him. As much as he denied it, she had caused it. After all, the nurse simply continued the process. She unwrapped the bandage and, for the first time, Ochako could see the wound for herself. It didn't look like much from the outside, it was just a long, red line. But she knew it was deep, quite literally a hand's length deep. You got really lucky, the nurse commented. If you were found any time later, you wouldn't be here right now. Izuku simply smiled and rubbed the back of his head. So this is what being a hero's like, huh? Ochako looked at him and chuckled. He might not have a hero license of his own or have a quirk, but he was still a hero to her. The nurse cleaned up the wound and bandaged it again, then informed them that he would be free to leave in a couple of hours. There was just some paperwork that needed to be done. She left shortly after. It's amazing how much medicine has changed since quirks existed, don't you think? Ochako commented, which caused Izuku's heart to hurt a little. Yeah, it's amazing, he responded melancholically. Anyway, Ochako said, noticing how his mood changed. I'll go with you to the bakery later, okay? Sure. But why? He asked, puzzled. Just in case, she responded, not wanting to say that she simply wanted to spend more time with him. Okay, thank you again. I told you there's no need, she exclaimed, which caused him to laugh again. After some grueling paperwork with the hospital and the police, Izuku was free to go to his home. Along with Ochako, they walked towards the bakery, admiring the city like Izuku did on his regular runs. They arrived after a while, and they went in. Let me offer you something, he said. You stayed the night with me, please. His face turned red as a tomato as he realized what he said, but he moved to the kitchen to cover it. If you insist, Ochako said, happy that she would get to spend more time with him. They chatted for a while, laughing and smiling just like they always did. It was as if the events from the day prior hadn't happened at all. After a while, they heard a knock on the door. Who is it? Izuku asked, puzzled as to why someone would go by on a Saturday of all days. It's me, sweetie, an old voice said from outside. Miss Azumi, come in, he said as he got up. The door opened and revealed the same old lady that had told Ochako about the cemetery and Izuku's mom. Hello miss, she said, standing up from her seat. Oh hello there sweetheart, she said with a smile. I just wanted to check up on little Izuku here, who I heard was taken to the hospital yesterday. How do you know? He asked, surprised at the old lady. I was told by one of the people who were here, a close friend of mine. She smiled at him before asking, so, how are your injuries? I got them for trying to be a hero. He scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. I've always wanted to be one. Oh, I remember. Miss Azumi laughed. Young Izuku dressed as All Might yelling things like, plus ultra. She continued laughing, which made Izuku's face go a deep bright shade of red. Why yeah, well, I wanted to, but I made a promise to my mother so I couldn't. Why? She asked. She had personally known Inko as she was one of the store's longest running customers. I still feel guilty about what happened, he said, looking down. You do? She asked, surprised, but you did nothing wrong. I did. He was interrupted by Miss Azumi's hand going up to silence him, while she looked inside her bag with the other. She pulled an envelope out of it. I should have given this to you earlier, but I didn't think that you wouldn't know what happened. She gave him the envelope. Here, she can explain a lot better than I can. He opened it and found a letter, written in his mom's handwriting. How long have you? He asked, confused. Just read it, dear. She smiled at him. He looked at it. It read, Dear Izuku, if you are reading this, then you must still feel guilty about what happened to me. I just wanted to say that the tumor I have was diagnosed months ago. I elected to use that time to teach you how to live and manage by yourself. The doctor told me that it was beyond repair when she found it, and I'd be lucky to live more than half a year. I'm sorry if you're mad at me, and you have every right to be. I sincerely apologize for not telling you, but it was my own choice to do so. I only wanted you to focus on the task I gave you. You would have worried over me like crazy if I told you about it. I chose this because I care about you. I didn't want your last months with me be filled with sorrow. Instead, I wanted to teach you to live by yourself, so you could live on after I left. This letter will only be given to you if you still feel guilty about it, so don't hate Miss Azumi if she didn't notice sooner. She was a great friend. I'm glad I had her. I'm sorry if I caused you more grief than necessary. I hope you can one day. Forgive me. I'm so proud of you, Izuku. I will always be. You turned into a great baker faster than I would ever predict. I love you, son. I'm sorry I cannot be there with you. Your mother, who loves you the most, Inko. Izuku stared at the letter, tears slowly rolling down his face. Thank you, Mom, for everything. He thought as he hugged the letter to his chest, looking up at the sky. Chapter 6. Every single weekday of the year Izuku would work at his bakery, except for his birthday in the case it was a weekday. There were other days where he would cut the days short if they happened to land on a weekday, the 24th and 31st of December. In these days he would cook a massive soup pot for homeless people to eat with him. As everyone else was with his family during those days and he had no one to share them with, he would organize it to simply spend time with anyone who wanted to join and eat with him. This year it was no exception, as both of these days landed on a Thursday. It was on Monday of that same week when Ochako came to his shop, as she would usually do in the afternoon. Hello, Midoriya, she greeted as she entered, but he wasn't in the room. Hello, he answered from the kitchen, I'll be right there, just wait for a little. Okay, she said as she sat down at the small table in the middle of the room. This was their usual routine. Ochako would come by after she was let off from work. Izuku would be working on the bread he had set apart in the afternoon, which he would then give to her when she arrived. They would sit and talk about various things for a while before she would go to her apartment. Done, Izuku said as he came out of the kitchen, a paper bag in his hands. Here you go, just out of the oven. Thanks, she said as she took the bag, then proceeded to take a tiny piece out and ate it. How is it? Izuku asked, looking at her curiously. I love it, she said, smiling at him. It just smelled so good I couldn't resist. I'm glad you like it. He looked down, trying to hide his cheeks, who had turned bright pink. She smiled at this. She loved how he would blush almost every time she complimented him. Izuku sat down in front of Ochako, who held the paper bag in her arms, like a plushie, and let out a long sigh. The day's work had finally caught up with him. Long day, she asked. Yeah, I stupidly decided to jog too far away from here, and I had to sprint back here in order to make it in time. He rubbed his eyes and shook his head before looking at her once again. She couldn't help but laugh at his situation. Of course, he would rather die than to open the shop late, she thought as she laughed. Come on, he said, looking down again, it isn't that funny. I'm sorry, she said, but continued laughing. It's just that kind of thing only happens to you. Izuku found her laugh to be contagious, and was soon laughing alongside her. They stayed that way for a bit before Ochako was finally able to calm down and speak normally. Anyway, she said, changing the topic, what are you doing for Christmas? I'm going to do the usual and cook some soup for anyone that wants to join, I suppose, he said as he thought about it. How about you? I'm gonna go off to see my parents tomorrow and come back on Monday, after my birthday. Why your birthday? He asked in surprise. Didn't I tell you? She asked as she thought about it. I don't think you have. She thought harder, but Izuku was right. She had no memory of her telling him. Well, it's on Sunday, the 27th. Really? He asked, dumbfounded. Yeah, she responded, nodding her head as she did. But I haven't even prepared anything. He exclaimed, then lowered his voice, and I haven't thought of anything to make cause bread would be too repetitive. Maybe I could do something else. Izuku continued mumbling until he was cut off by Ochako. You there? She asked, waving her hand in front of his face. Why, yeah, he managed to get out as he was broken out of his concentration. I just got distracted, sorry. She couldn't help but giggle again at his reaction, it was just too cute for her. They talked for a while before Ochako had to go home, as she was leaving the following morning. As Izuku walked her to the door, she stopped in front of him and hugged him tightly. You Uraraka, he stammered, but didn't pull back. What are you doing? She simply looked up at him and smiled before getting on her toes and giving Izuku a gentle kiss on the cheek. Merry Christmas, Izuku, she said before letting go and running away in the opposite direction, her face buried in her hands. Dash 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 dot. She couldn't believe what she had just done. She was completely embarrassed. What if he takes it the wrong way? What if he doesn't think of me that way? A million thoughts like those crowded her mind. After all, it was the most daring thing she'd ever done. But even though she was filled with regret and embarrassment, she was somehow happy. She had done it. Yeah, she had run away almost immediately after, but she had done it, and of that, there was no doubt. She felt bad that she hadn't done it sooner. Now she would have to wait until next Monday to see him. There was a bright side to this though. She would be able to figure out exactly what to say to him when she came back, or at least, she hoped she could. When she was finally able to raise her head up once again, she took a moment to breathe and then continued walking to her apartment, a wide smile spread across her face. Dash 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 dot. Did that just happen? Izuku wondered, too stunned to move. Did Uraraka just do that? His face was a deep shade of red as he slowly started to realize what had just happened. He thought he was dreaming for a second, but decided against it. It all felt too real to be his imagination. When he finally came to, he blinked several times and finally started breathing normally. He went back inside his shop but tumbled a little as he walked. He definitely had not expected what had just transpired. He closed everything and went upstairs to his room. He sat on the bed and looked forward, to nothing in particular. Does this mean she likes me? He thought. He had never been more confused in his life. And though it was only a simple kiss on the cheek, it had felt different. Izuku couldn't pinpoint exactly what it had been. Maybe it was the way she hugged him first. Maybe it was the smile on her face as she did. Maybe it was the tiny blush that had formed on her cheeks as she looked up at him. All of these thoughts circulated his head as he got changed and tried to sleep. And after a couple of hours, he finally managed to do so. As expected, Ochako hadn't shown her face around the bakery the next day, so Izuku knew she was already gone until the following week. This gave him a window of opportunity he hadn't had before, as he had just learned of her birthday. He would try to surprise him by making something he had never in his life even thought of making. A cake. He had no experience with such things, but he wanted to do it regardless. He waited patiently until the last of the customers from early in the morning left the shop, eager to go outside. When they finally did, Izuku quickly closed up the shop, grabbed his wallet and went outside. He ran towards the nearest bookstore and entered. "Hello, sir." A young woman at the counter said, "How can I help you today?" "I'm looking for some cooking books," he replied as he looked around. "Sure. What exactly are you looking for?" "How to make a cake is really all I need to know." "Right this way then," she concluded before leading Izuku to a nearby bookshelf, before taking out several books. "These will all help you, I guarantee it." Izuku looked at the 3 or so books the woman held out, eyeing them with intrigue. "I'll take all of them," he said as he looked up at the woman, who smiled when she heard that. As he exited the shop, Izuku felt like a kid on Christmas Eve all over again. He clutched the bag around his arms as he happily made his way back to home. He was eager to start baking, but with all the work he had to do in the week, he knew the earliest he could start was on Saturday morning. He decided he would read as much as he could every free moment he had and hoped that would be enough to bake a cake worthy of Ochako by the time she came back. Even though the books were just simple cooking books, they were dense. They had hundreds of recipes total, each different from the other, and they would go in depth explaining the hows and whys of the whole process. It was expected for the books to be like this, as they were written by one of the best chefs of the generation, who had a cooking specific quirk that let him know exactly how good a dish was just by looking at it. Izuku read every single moment he could. He would stay up late reading, perfecting his knowledge of baking. He would read all the time during his breaks. He would sometimes even read when he was working, but his customers weren't talking to him. He studied these books from top to bottom, taking in every detail, every variation that would improve the test, everything that would help to bring up the quality of his cake. He made annotations at the side of the pages and put paper notes in pages where he thought they would be important, and he was completely determined on making a fantastic cake, one that Ochako would never forget. And so, the week went on. He did his usual open cookout on Christmas. It was as fun as it always had been. He laughed and joked around with anyone that joined, not caring who they were or where they came from. He treated everyone the exact same way, kindly and happily. Long after midnight, when everyone had already left, Izuku stayed up a little longer to work on his notes. In preparation for the cookout, he had completely ignored the books and felt guilty about it. By Friday night, Izuku had already read the 3 books and had 14 pages of notes in total. When he put the pen down to sleep, he knew there was nothing more he could do to prepare himself. He was going to have to try his hardest all weekend to bake the most absolutely perfect cake he could. When Saturday finally arrived, he got to work. He decided on making a strawberry shortcake for Ochako. He didn't know why exactly, but he felt she would like it. A quick trip to the shop got him all of the ingredients he needed: strawberries, sugar, baking powder, flour, baking soda, heavy cream, vanilla, and lemon. He set all of these on a table in his kitchen, breathed in, and got started. He started off with the strawberries, quickly cutting them into quarters and mixing them with sugar. He then put these in the fridge to use later. He then preheated the oven and put 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, 2 tablespoons sugar and salt all in the same bowl. He added heavy cream to taste and mixed until everything was combined. He brought out a pan and put the mixture in, then proceeded to put it in the oven. After a while, he brought it out and tasted it. Nope, not quite good enough, he thought, before throwing it away and starting over. After several attempts, he varied the amount of each ingredient, gently adding and subtracting amounts, trying to get that perfect taste he longed for. He ended up trying for hours on end, and before he knew it, it was already midnight. He had worked through the entire day and used most of the ingredients. What a waste, he thought to himself as he threw the nearly but not quite perfect attempts at the shortcake away. He sighed before going upstairs and collapsing on his bed. The next day had a bit more success than the last. He finally realized that he wasn't supposed to be baking an entire cake. The measurements and ingredients weren't for that, they were only for slices. When he realized this, he laughed but also berated himself for not noticing earlier on, knowing exactly what he had to do now. He went back to the store and bought the ingredients again, except for the lemon and vanilla. He got out a smaller pan, a square one that was 8 inches. He repeated the process and baked the shortcake. He tasted it when it came out and his face lit up with joy. This is so close, Izuku yelled excitedly. He knew it could be perfected and decided to keep trying until finally, he had reached just the flavor he wanted. After multiple tries, again changing the amounts of each of the ingredients, he brought it out and tasted it. As soon as the shortcake hit his mouth, he threw his arms up in celebration. Yes, he celebrated. I did it. He put it in the fridge and noticed that the strawberries were completely frozen. He had forgotten about them entirely. He took them out and waited for a little, then tasted them. They tasted bland, not as good as he would have liked. He checked the recipe and saw that it said to keep them in the fridge for 30 minutes. He sighed and decided to leave them for the end. When Ochako came by, he also realized that the whipped cream that had to be added was also going to be difficult to maintain in the fridge, so he decided to simply cut the shortcake into pieces and wait for the next day. He glanced at the clock as he went upstairs to sleep. It was 10 o'clock by then. As he once again collapsed into his bed, he realized that he had probably overworked himself trying to do the base of the strawberry shortcake. He wondered why that was, but his mind was too tired to think straight, so he assumed it was the first thing that popped up. It's for Uraraka, of course. He thought happily as sleep enveloped him. Izuku woke up the next day as he would every Monday, early so he could buy the ingredients for his bread and pay the people who delivered them. Delivered them. He got off to his usual routine as he baked the bread for his first customers. Part of him hoped Ochako wouldn't come early as his gift wasn't ready to give it to her. He was delighted but also disappointed at the same time when she didn't stop by in the morning. Whenever a customer left, he told them that they didn't have to come by in the afternoon, because the shop would be closed at that time. As soon as he could, he closed up the shop and moved to the kitchen. He once again cut the strawberries in quarters and mixed them with sugar before putting them in the fridge again, hoping he wouldn't forget about them. He then got started on the whipped cream. He zested a lemon and kept it close to him. He took out his mixer and poured in heavy cream alongside sugar and vanilla, then added the lemon zest and mixed it all for a couple of minutes. When he tasted it, he couldn't believe it. He had gotten in just how he wanted on his first try. He didn't know if it was the heavy annotations or the fact that he had already tried so much he was being blessed with a stroke of luck, but he didn't care either way. He knew there was no way he could better what he just tasted. Izuku retrieved the shortcake from the fridge and cut it into 6 pieces, then he cut each half horizontally again. He took the strawberries from the fridge and put some on every bottom piece of the shortcake, leaving 6 out of the 12 total without. He took the whipped cream and put a generous amount on every bottom, then put every piece of shortcake that was untouched on top of every piece that had whipped cream and strawberries, effectively creating 6 big strawberry shortcake slices. Finally, he placed the remaining strawberries on top of each slice. He looked at the 6 slices, a huge grin spread across his face. It was finally done. He wiped the sweat from his brow and sat down on a nearby chair, breathing exhaustedly. He had more than overworked himself over the present, but he considered it was worth it. After all, it's for Uraraka, Izuku said in a low voice, his cheeks turning bright pink as he thought about her. Only a couple of minutes went by before he heard a knock on the door. It was close to 8 in the afternoon, so he doubted it was a customer who hadn't gotten the memo. Who is it? Izuku asked as he stepped out of the kitchen. It's me, she said excitedly. I came by to see you. Izuku knew instantly who it was, so he stepped towards the door and opened it. The second he opened it, he couldn't even react as Ochako threw herself onto him, hugging him tightly. Hello, Midoriya, she greeted as she looked up at him. Hey Uraraka, he responded, his voice cracking multiple times. He stepped away from the door for a little bit before continuing, please, come in. Ochako let go of him and sat down at the table in the middle, a smile wide across her face. Wait here, Izuku said before moving to the kitchen, I have something for you. Ochako's heart was racing. I'm going to tell him, she thought with determination. I'm definitely going to tell him, no matter what. After a little, he came outside with a platter containing all 6 strawberry shortcake slices, 2 plates, and 2 forks. He started, his face getting redder by the second. Since it was your birthday yesterday, I figured you would like these. Are those? Ochako asked, but didn't finish the sentence, her eyes widening as Izuku set down the platter on the table. It's the first cake I've made. I tried all weekend long to make it right. He confessed, anxious about what she would think. She just looked at him, her mouth hanging open, unable to speak. She looked at the cake slices, then back at Izuku, then back at the cake slices. The situation was too much for her. Maybe she thought for a moment, likes me too. Please, help yourself, Izuku said, not understanding why Ochako wasn't speaking. Oh no, he thought, panicking. Maybe she doesn't like strawberries. Maybe she's allergic. Maybe she. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Ochako taking a piece off with her fork and eating it. The room grew silent. Izuku's thoughts were completely stopped. Everything could wait until she said her thoughts out loud. Midoriya, she asked, getting up from her seat to be somewhat level with Izuku. Why yes, he asked. She kept getting closer to him, her head looking down as she did. She said in a low voice, her face still looking downwards. You. He was interrupted when Ochako lifted her face up and rapidly closed the distance between them. You Uraraka, he asked. What are you? I'm sorry. I can't find the words to tell you. He was once again interrupted by her. Izuku didn't even get a chance to respond before Ochako planted her lips on his. Where stories live. Discover now.